Whew, right on time. Perfect. Welcome everybody to Just G Live, and I have just a little bit to make sure that I have everything. Give me just a second, and let me find these notes that I have written up. Let's see. Where am I at? There we go. Perfect. All set up, ready to go. Have my notes ready. Have a couple of you guys already in the stream. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. I hope everybody is out there doing well, staying safe. I'm George Giro, and welcome to Just G Live. This is a Wednesday edition, again, talking about baseball, getting ready for next season, what should be this season, and it's still a shame that the season is not going on right now. It's one of my favorite things and one of the things that I look forward to most during the summer, but with everything going on, better safe than sorry. I saw recently that the MLB kind of had a plan to get everything going with all the teams in Arizona, no fans. Um, as far as I know, I doubt it's actually going to happen. I doubt it's going to work out that way. Some players are for it. Some players are just saying, "Look, as long as we can do it safely, I want to play." Whereas some other players, like I think it was Mike Trout who said it earlier today, that there are just too many red flags that it just doesn't seem like something that'll be feasible and something that'll work. So it's definitely got to be something that all the players have to be behind and have to really try their best to get passed through or get pushed through whatever kind of kind of system they have to get everything through before they can start some games going. But nonetheless, we are still in kind of a state of limbo. So I think it's better to just kind of talk about what could be going on and what could go on in the future. So, for this afternoon's episode, we will be talking about the NL Central. The NL Central has been a very consistently good division the last 15, 20 or so years. The teams in the division are the St. Louis Cardinals, and I'm doing this in order, and I'll be going through the records real quick as well. It's the St. Louis Cardinals last season went 91 and 71, ended up going surprisingly all the way to the NL Championship Series. The Milwaukee Brewers went 89 and 73. The Chicago Cubs went 84 and 78. The Cincinnati Reds have continued their mediocrity, if not, in some years past, they've just been straight up bad. They went 75 and 87, and the Pittsburgh Pirates went 69 and 93. It really is kind of a shame what the Pirates are going through right now. They've had a lot of talent over the last couple of years. They either just haven't been able to maximize it, traded it away, or they've just not gotten it done, not put everything together. With that in mind, we are going to go through, as per the usual, go through all these teams in order. This time, I think what I'm going to do is start every team with what moves they made during the offseason and then go through all the players and the possible opening day lineup, that kind of thing. So, with that in mind, we're going to get right into it, get started with the St. Louis Cardinals. And they have not been necessarily busy during the winter. They made a couple moves, but some don't really make a huge amount of a difference right now. So the big move that I saw that the Cardinals made is they traded Jose Martinez and Randy Arozarena to the Tampa Bay Rays for pitching prospect Andrew Liberator, I want to say it is, and catcher Edgardo Rodriguez. This is kind of a trade that's really kind of just solid for both teams in mind here. Tampa Bay really needed the bat, and Arozarena brings a lot of speed to your lineup and is a pretty much almost MLB ready prospect. Whereas the Cardinals really do need to work mostly on their pitching staff. They always seem to be rotating through a ton of talent with the bats. And that's exactly what they got. Liberator was named the number 41 overall MLB prospect of all prospects, not just pitching prospects, just before last season. And if he gets to any point of that potential, then he should be a starter for the Cardinals team for, I would say, years to come. And the other two moves that they made were both signing pitchers. They signed Kwang Hyun Kim from Korea, and let me see what I can find out a little. If I can find out a little bit more about Kim, that's probably not the best way to. This is probably not the best way to do this, but we've got some time. I'm currently just looking through there. There was an article put together by MLB.com, by MLB News, where they break down pretty much the big trade or big, not just trades, but big moves that teams made through this off season, through this winter. And for one thing, that's where I'm getting all of this information. That's where I'm getting these specific moves. There are, I mean, things baseball is just full of a ton of different moves happening, be that players getting sent down to the minors or players getting brought up. So many different things happen. Here we go. Found it. So, Kwon Hyun Kim, this is going to be his first season in Major League Baseball, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, this will be his first actual opportunity to play in Major League Baseball. He almost came over to play for San Diego for the Padres back in 2014, but they couldn't come to an actual agreement. And just 2 years ago, or at this point, 3 years ago in 2017, Kim had to have Tommy John surgery to repair the ligament in his elbow. So he was likely on some sort of injured list and recovering from that over probably the next year and a half, 2 years. That's kind of the going rate for Tommy John nowadays. So it'll be interesting to see how he performs at the major league, at the MLB level. He's already 32 years old, and he didn't get a huge contract. 2 years, $8 million. He's a lefty, which will be a good addition to this completely all right-handed kind of starting five rotation for the Cardinals. And from everything that I've seen of Kim, he's got some nasty stuff. His biggest weapon is likely his slider. It's got a lot of lateral movement on it. His fastball velocity might be a little bit lower than the kind of average at the MLB level, but if he can use his slider and his curveball to his advantage, he can get batters to kind of bite on those and swing more. And that's kind of what a lot of baseball, a lot of pitching has turned into now, is just using either overwhelming heat, overwhelming speed, or overwhelming stuff to, instead of try to get batters to, either ground out or fly out, just swing and miss. And the other major move made by the Cardinals is that they signed Adam Wainwright to a 1-year deal, bringing him back, the veteran right-handed pitcher. He's been not at his normal peak the last couple of years, but that's kind of what happens when players start to get towards the end of their prime, the end of their career. But with all that in mind, and with they did make minimal moves, but the moves that they made should be impactful. So we're going to get into just the predicted starting 8 on the field, and then the pitching staff or pitching rotation and their closer. So looking at the Cardinals, it looks like they would have Dexter Fowler from right field leading off, followed up by Colton Wong and Paul Goldschmidt. Paul DeJong batting cleanup. Longtime catcher Yadi Molina catching and batting 5th. Matt Carpenter batting 6th and playing at 3rd. Lane Thomas in left field batting 7th, and Harrison Bader from center field playing or batting 8th. So that isn't necessarily a truly scary lineup. The top end of that lineup could certainly do some damage, especially the kind of 3-piece combo there with Colton Wong, Paul Goldschmidt, and Paul DeJong. Those three have just been spectacular, especially last season, particularly Paul Goldschmidt coming over from the Arizona Diamondbacks. Whenever I saw that trade was made and Goldschmidt was going to the Cardinals, I knew that was essentially just them finally finding their solid replacement for Albert Pujols, who, I mean, that's someone that you don't easily replace. But in today's MLB, Paul Goldschmidt is probably one of the better first basemen you can get. He's very consistent at the plate, and he's very, very good defensively. Moving on to the pitching staff, the pitching rotation, the big breakout star for the Cardinals last year was their new ace, Jack Flaherty, who he was just incredible last season. This team or this division really didn't have kind of a standout team from it going into the playoffs. And when I saw that it was the Cardinals winning that spot and it wasn't someone like the Brewers, and the Milwaukee Brewers had a very, very good team last year. This year they might take a step back, but we'll get into that a little bit more in depth when we break down what moves they've made and what their starting lineup could be looking like this season. But when the Cardinals made it to the playoffs, I really didn't have a lot of hope for them. If I'm not mistaken, this was back before last winter in the first semester. We talked about this on the G and Finn show plenty with baseball playoffs. I was pretty low on this Cardinals team, but they were very surprising. Flaherty really showed out. He was incredible, and I don't expect him to slow down any next season. Coming in the second spot is Dakota Hudson. Hudson also had a bit of a breakout year. He's a solid, two-piece for Flaherty. Adam Wainwright actually is coming in at kind of the third rotation spot with this team. And that just shows, it's just a mixture of he isn't necessarily prime Adam Wainwright anymore. He's starting to slow down just a little bit. And at the same time, younger and at this point, arguably better pitchers are coming up through the ranks. Carlos Martinez is pitching fourth, and newcomer Kwang Hyun Kim is pitching fifth. If I were to look at this team and say whether they're much better or much worse, I do think they're going to miss the bat from Jose Martinez. The only problem is that he also has started to age and show his age, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Jose Martinez at this point is a minus in the defensive column. He is not very good defensively, and realistically, the only place that you would be able to play him is first, either first or maybe right field, but he doesn't really have the pace anymore to really track down a fly ball as well as he maybe once could have. And at this point, with the Cardinals having Paul Goldschmidt just playing first, there really isn't a spot for Martinez. Trading him to a team in the AL like Tampa needed that bat. Tampa needed a big bat. And thing is, they're lucky enough to play in the American League where they have the DH rule, where they can shelter him at DH and not have to put him out on the field. Now, Tampa moving on from a catcher and a pitching prospect. The pitching prospect, I'm sure they're not worried about. That's never been a big deal for them. They've always been a powerhouse when it comes to pitching prospects and creating, MLB quality pitchers. Losing out on a young and very solid catcher very well could bite Tampa in the butt later. They're kind of trying to mitigate that by getting Randy Arozarena in this trade. He's extremely fast. He showed up a little bit last year, towards the end of the year, played with the Cardinals instead of their AAA team. And he was very good. He was very fast on the bases, very good defensively in the outfield, using that speed well. And if I'm not mistaken, he hit above 300. I think it was like 324 or something like that. But either way, that's a very good click, even in a small sample size. It will be interesting to see whether the Rays use him in a kind of backup role or send him down to the AAA kind of ranks before giving him the full opportunity at the MLB level. And I almost forgot the closer, expected closer for the Cardinals next year will be either Andrew Miller, who's a lefty, or righty Giovanni Gallegos. Again, I think those two, even if they platoon that position, if they use both of them as closers, depending on the situation. There is a new rule actually in baseball this season that kind of kills that idea that you can use multiple closers or you can use a relieving pitcher as some sort of opener. And that's what a lot of teams have been working on recently, is taking really, really good kind of short-term relievers, sticking them at the front of games, and then using kind of a long reliever to eat up the middle or the second through seventh really innings. And you can't really do that anymore because the MLB has instituted a rule where pitchers have to throw at least one full inning before being able to be subbed in or out. Now, that kind of limits the options when it comes to having multiple closers or multiple pitchers that teams can use as closers. But either way, in this case, I think lefty Andrew Miller, I think Miller's going to take that. He's got, I think, a little bit more success at the MLB level. But it will be interesting to see what the Cardinals do. I think this team is still very talented. They proved me wrong last postseason, and I don't expect them to do that again. I still have them playing at a very high level most of the year and possibly even winning the division. So that's enough for the St. Louis Cardinals. Now it's time to talk about the Brewers. The Brewers have had an interesting offseason, to say the least. They've made a couple additions, and they've had a couple major losses. So early on in the offseason, they essentially had to re-sign or use free agency to build an entire infield. So they lost Mike Moustakas, Jesus Aguilar. I want to say Mark Shaw and Eric Thames. Losing all of those to free agency or just releasing them. And instead, they go out and signed Eric Sogard, Justin Smoke, and Healy. Where's Healy at? I want to say it's Matt Healy. But either way, they had to go out and sign. They're pretty much all util guys that can kind of slot in almost anywhere in the infield. But either way, those are guys that have been or are either towards the end of their career or having a career sort of revival, or just kind of depth players that this team's going to need because they don't have a lot of depth, especially at the infield positions. They're all coming in on one-year contracts. And it'll be interesting to see what this team decides to do next offseason when all these guys also have their contracts expire, whether they go ahead and try and re-sign them during the season or giving them a contract extension, or whether they try to do something similar next offseason, which I don't know if it'll be necessarily possible. Along with that, they signed Avisail Garcia from the Tampa Bay Rays. He brings a big bat. Defensively, he's pretty much average. He's just okay, but his bat will certainly be an addition to this lineup. They also signed Brett Anderson. He'll be a late rotation starter for this team. Josh Lindblom is coming back to Major League Baseball after playing in Korea. And both he and Anderson, who are going to be your kind of late, 4 and 5 day not relievers, but starting pitchers, those two fill a huge hole that this Brewers team has had. As long as they're solid for this team, that's pretty much all that the Brewers are asking for. They're not asking for, a super high level of success. They just want these guys to be good. They want them to be average. That's all they need, because this lineup has a lot of pop to it, and there's a lot of talent in this batting lineup. Other than those moves, the Brewers have traded for Omar Narvaez for a pitching prospect. That's essentially to replace Yasmani Grandal, who left in free agency. So essentially, they're taking Grandal, who was the best batting catcher in baseball, and replacing him with the second best batting catcher in baseball over the last couple of years. The interesting thing with that, though, is if you look at the metrics, how Narvaez has been doing it doesn't make a lot of sense, because he doesn't hit the ball necessarily very hard. The amount of times he hits them hard isn't very high. And at the same time, his jump rate out of the box is particularly slow. So it will be interesting to see if, based on those metrics, if Narvaez's success at the plate will be sustainable. The Brewers are certainly hoping for that to be the case, especially when you're losing arguably, well, not necessarily arguably, when they're having to replace the best batting catcher in baseball. And apart from that, there was one trade that I talked about on Monday. It was the trade with the Padres. The Brewers traded for Luis Urias, Eric Lauer, and a player to be named for Grisham and Davies. This really just fills another big need for the Brewers. Urias is going to step right into the excuse me, into the infield, hopefully, as long as he's healthy. As of right now, it's not looking like he is going to be healthy. I'll talk about that a little bit when we get to the actual lineup. And then Eric Lauer is another new name for this pitching staff, and he should slot right into the middle of that 5-man rotation. So those are just the major moves that the Brewers made. And looking at this lineup, we're just going to run down this. Batting first would be Lorenzo Cain from center field. He's just awesome. I love Lorenzo Cain, but I don't love him as much as their two-hole, and that would be Christian Yelich, a probably at this point perennial MVP candidate. He's just incredible at everything. He's so good defensively. Sure, he is playing right field, and that isn't necessarily the most kind of strenuous position. But either way, not much gets past him, not much gets behind him, and he's exceptional at the plate, leading this team the last couple of years, leading most of the NL actually in both average and home runs. Batting third would be Keston Hiura at second base. Batting fourth would be they've got either Justin Smoke or Ryan Braun playing first. Just for the time being, one, because he's coming in from free agency, and two, he's a little bit younger. I could see Justin Smoke getting that starting role. They've got Avisail Garcia from left field batting fifth, Omar Narvaez batting sixth. In the 7-hole, they have either Eric Sogard or Jed Gyorko, I think it is Jed Gyorko, playing at third base and batting seventh. Again, this is something where Sogard played pretty well at the end of last season with the Rays, apart from whenever he was injured and just wasn't playing. I could see him getting the start over Gyorko. And batting eighth would be Orlando Arcia playing shortstop. And with this whole kind of coronavirus thing going on right now and everything that's involved with that, this changes how injuries are affecting teams, because there's all this extra time where baseball isn't happening. Games are not being played right now. So a lot of these players that would have started the regular season injured aren't necessarily having that happen. So with that in mind, Luis Urias was supposed to compete with Arcia for the starting job at shortstop before he had surgery in late January for a fractured hamate bone in his left hand. It was supposed to keep him off the field for about 8 weeks. So while that normally would have kept him out for the start of the regular season, he'll end up probably playing instead of Arcia. And if that's the case, I could certainly see him batting probably either fifth or sixth, maybe even batting cleanup. Or no, actually, I don't see him batting cleanup. I think they would likely give that cleanup duty to Garcia and have Urias kind of slot in at the 5 seed and push Smoke or Braun down a little bit. I don't see a lot of bat talent or a lot of power coming from Smoke or Braun, where that's kind of what you'd be getting from Avisail Garcia. And then moving on to the pitching staff, the rotation and the closer for this team. Of course, this team has Brandon Woodruff as their ace. He's been very, very good over the last couple of years. Pitching second in this kind of 5-day rotation will be righty Adrian Hauser. He is, again, another holdover from the team last year. He's also been very good as of late. Then you have 3 newcomers, 3 guys that the Brewers are, again, just wanting and expecting to just be good. They've got Eric Lauer, Brett Anderson, and Josh Lindblom. All 3 of those guys, I would say at this point, just based on the fact that I haven't seen enough of them in recent time playing extremely well to put them above replacement. I'd say they're probably just very average at that replacement level. And then their closer is one of the best in baseball, in my opinion. They've got Josh Hader, who has a nasty, nasty fastball and a lot of stuff, a lot of talent there. One note that the MLB kind of website link or article had is that Corey Knebel figures to play a pretty big role in the bullpen when he returns from Tommy John. So he should be an option for the Brewers come about May, or that's what he was supposed to. I don't know how his rehab is going. Normally, in normal circumstances, rehab from Tommy John, as I said, is at least a year, at least 12 months. He's quickly reaching that 12-month mark, but with everything going on, I don't know how his rehab is going, if he's able to really throw from the mound with a coach or with a trainer, but that'll be something else to see. And looking at some of the losses for this team, replacing Mustakas Aguilar Shaw and Thames with Smoke, Sogard, and Healy, I think that really kind of kills a lot of the offense that this team had, because Aguilar was a big bat, Mustakas is a big bat, and Thames is a big bat, and you're kind of replacing those guys with more small ball players. Sogard's never had a big bat in his career, even back when he played for Toronto. Smoke has had, spurts of power, but it's not necessarily any level of consistency like you would be getting with Mike Moustakas or even Jesus Aguilar. And at the same time, the bottom half of this rotation, it is worrying. It is concerning, the fact that they're all just average pitchers, that they only realistically have Woodruff as their, every, or not even every day because he's a starter, but he's the only guy that they have that I would consistently put my trust in to get you through 6-7 innings of, maybe at the most 2-3 run baseball. You're not getting that out of Hauser, Lauer, Anderson, or Lindblom. And I think that is a big concern for this team. With that in mind, they went 89-73 last year. I think it'll probably stay about the same. If not, maybe they lose a couple more games. With a team like this where you have a lot of bat talent with Kane, Yelich, Garcia, even Narvaez, even though we have no idea how he does it, he is talented at the plate. He can put the ball in play. With guys like that throughout your lineup, you expect your offense to play pretty well, and do you just fine to win you some games, even when your pitching isn't necessarily getting it all done. Now, this team we can get through pretty quick. The Chicago Cubs have done pretty much nothing. They've had their team stay relatively the same, which to me shows that, let me rephrase that. They have one major loss. Okay. They've had one major loss, and it's no one that plays baseball. It's their manager. Joe Maddon decided to take his ideology, his talent, his whatever you want to call it, and try and make the LA Angels a viable team again, even though they've had the best player in baseball the last decade. No, either way, when it comes to personnel, the Chicago Cubs are relatively the same as they were last year. So, with that in mind, I think it's time to just kind of run through their team. They haven't made many changes. Batting first for them would be their second baseman, Nico Horner. Batting second would be third baseman Chris Bryant. Batting third would be first baseman Anthony Rizzo. And batting fourth is their shortstop and arguably one of my favorite players in baseball, Javier Baez. I love Baez El Mago. He's very, very good and extremely fun to watch. Batting fifth would be Kyle Schwarber from left. Batting sixth would be their catcher, Wilson Contreras. Batting seventh would be Jason Hayward, who is still on that massive contract that he signed with the Cubs. Batting eighth would be center fielder Ian Happ. And just looking at it, there is a lot of talent still on this team. Chris Bryant, Rizzo, Baez, and Schwarber, all extremely good bats. Horner is very, very consistent, and he's very good at getting on base. For a catcher, Contreras has a lot of talent. He was hurt last year, if I'm not mistaken, missed some time, but with everything being delayed, he should be available for the season start. And then you've got their 7 and 8 batters, Hayward and Happ, who, Hayward has certainly not been worth the contract that he was signed to, both defensively and offensively. He has not lived up to that contract, and Ian Happ is another replacement level player. He kind of just slots in there and plays, decent enough defense from center field. Now it comes to the Cubs pitching staff. Their ace is still John Lester, who he played well last year as usual. I don't expect him to slow down anytime soon. He still looks like he has ton in the tank. Second up from him is Yu Darvish. He's coming over. No, he played last year for the Cubs, but he's been solid for them. Then they've got Kyle Hendricks at the third spot, Jose Quintana at the fourth, and their fifth pitcher is Tyler Chatwood. Their closer, again, will be Craig Kimbrell, who he was picked up midway through the season last year to be kind of their late game reliever or closer. And let me see if I can actually find his contract, because I thought it was a little bit weird based on just how he played for the Indians at the end of his time there. Let me see what he was signed to, because excuse me, not the Indians, the Red Sox. That's my bad. Let me see if I can find this contract real quick. I just remember it being a little bit much for what I expected. Yeah, he signed in June, which that's, you're missing a big chunk of the season. And he signed a 3-year, $43 million contract. And I think just for a closer, that's a little bit much. That's especially one who has struggled at times like Kimbrell with consistency. I think it's a bit much. I think that does put this team a little bit too close to the luxury tax for them to make a lot of moves. But at the end of the day, I do think this team has a lot of talent, especially in the bats. They were good last year. They were also one of those teams that was competing for the division. They were only 5 games back from the Brewers. And I expect them to be in the hunt again this year, hopefully getting a little bit more from guys like Chris Bryant and Kyle Schwarber. And with that in mind, I think it's time to now look at a team that has made a good couple moves. And, well, only one of these last two, I thought there was more that the Reds had done, but the 3 or 4 signings that the Reds have made are awesome. They will be extremely impactful for this team. So they made a couple offseason signings, the Reds did. They bring in Nick Castellanos, Shogo Akiyama, Wade Miley, and Mike Moustakas. And let me double check something as well on Akiyama. If I can, that's Shinemaguchi. Again, let me see if I can find this, because I was curious about this, because these NL Central teams have surprisingly, it seems as though they've done their part in scouting players that are not playing in Major League Baseball at the time. Like, I might already passed it. Either way, I'm pretty sure I remember what I was going to say about it, but nonetheless, Shogo Akiyama is coming over from Japan. He is a 32-year-old, at this point, rookie in Major League Baseball. He should be a huge, huge help to the center field defense of the Reds. Their defense in the outfield has been pretty bad in the last couple of years, and Akiyama is mostly known for his defense and his consistency at the plate. He's been very good in Japan. He's been an all-star the last couple of years. He's got a high batting average from over there and an even better defensive record. And then Nick Castellanos, Mike Moustakas, and, Wade Miley is a pitcher, but Moustakas and Castellanos both bring an MLB veteran presence, and they both have really, really big bats. But those are pretty much the only moves made by the Reds, although I do think they are very good moves. So looking at what their offense is looking like it's going to be, it looks like they will have Akiyama batting first, Joey Votto batting second. Votto, again, still on a huge contract with the Reds, and he's still one of the most consistent batters in all of Major League Baseball. I mean, I think I saw a crazy stat where the first time he ever kind of popped out to first base was last season, and he'd been playing in Major League Baseball for, I think it was like 12 years or something like that. Just absolutely crazy. Batting third, they've got Nick Castellanos written in at right field. Batting cleanup from third base would be Mike Moustakas. Excuse me. Jesse Winkler playing left field, batting fifth. Nick Senzel at second base, batting sixth. Catcher Tucker Barnhart batting seventh. And shortstop Freddie Galvis batting eighth. I don't know why they have Galvis batting so low. I've been impressed by him in his young career so far. I think he's been pretty good. And who do they have? Okay. And just another note, normally starting third baseman Eugenio Suarez is expected back to the Reds soon after opening day. Now, the additions that have been made to this, lineup is great, but what's most impressive to me now is this Reds kind of starting staff, adding Wade Miley to an already pretty tough, pretty stout pitching group. It looks like their starting pitchers are going to be Luis Castillo, who has been incredible the last couple of years. He had a breakout year last year, was just awesome. Pitching second is another righty, Sonny Gray, who had a rough go of it in New York, but it looks like he's kind of turned that corner and played really well for the Reds last year. And I think it might just be mine, but I would like to think everybody's favorite MLB psycho, Trevor Bauer. If you don't know, he is just extremely vocal on social media about anything that he can think of, especially when it comes to what he thinks is good or bad with Major League Baseball. But Trevor Bauer pitching in the third spot, I think he might have been traded for midway through last season. Trevor Bauer, excuse me. Yes, he was traded for at the trade deadline last season. And then Wade Miley, a lefty, comes in to pitch fourth, and at fifth, they've got Anthony DeScalafini. And last but not least, their closer should be Raisel Iglesias. Now, that entire group has almost ace potential. I mean, Castillo, Gray, and Bauer at all points in their career have been aces, have been number one guys for teams. That's essentially three number one pitchers. Wade Miley has been, I don't want to say trapped, but stuck in a very strong group in Houston up until this point, competing with guys like Zach Greinke, Justin Verlander, Garrett Cole for a starting position. So that's kind of where he's been buried. And it looks like he's going to end up being stuck in a 4 spot again with the Reds. But that just shows the depth of the pitching staff that this group has. And Iglesias as a closer is no slouch. He is very good at shutting down opposing offenses, especially opposing offenses that are trying to just play big ball and just blast out of the park. Overall, the Reds have made just great moves altogether. I think bringing in the bats that they have will kind of be the biggest change that they've made, where you've got power bats like Castellanos and Moustakas kind of backing up guys that get themselves on base a lot, like Joey Votto, and that's something that they haven't necessarily had much of in the past. So I think my kind of most improved team from the NL Central is the Reds. I genuinely think they might be better than, just all in all, I kind of have them being better than both the Brewers and the Cubs. Although I know their record was not good last year, but with the pitching staff like this and bringing in some more defensive talent and veteran MLB talent, Joey Votto is obviously their star. He's just so good every single year. And then essentially, it's not as though they have a kind of mismatched, kind of shoddily thrown together infield like the Brewers. So I think that's already a plus. I think they have a much better pitching staff than the Brewers. There's another plus. And then if I'm looking at the Cubs, I do think the Cubs have better bats, but I think at this point in their career, I think Castillo is better than Lester. I think Sonny Gray or Bauer is better than Darvish and Hendricks. And then when it comes to depth just there, Wade Miley is certainly better, in my opinion, than Quintana and Chatwood. So I think the Reds are certainly going to be better than they were last year. I think they're better than the Brewers, but I'm not sure about with the Cubs. Certainly, I think the Reds pitching staff is better than the Cubs pitching staff right now, but I think all in all, the lineup and the depth that the Cubs have is better than what the Reds have. But I think I'll talk a little bit about that after I go over the last team in this division. And this is another team that hasn't really done much, and they were, I'd say, worse than mediocre last year. They just weren't very good, and that's the Pittsburgh Pirates. So the moves that they really made during the winter, they traded Starling Marte for prospects and cash, and that leaves a pretty big hole in the outfield. They didn't get anybody or pick anybody up that's of any note that will kind of slide into that spot in center field. And the only other big move that I see that they've made is they signed catcher Luke Mail, kind of as a backup or a pair for their starting catcher Jacob Stallings. And with that in mind, I think we kind of just can go through this Pirates team very quickly. Again, I don't see a whole lot here. Batting first, they have Kevin Newman, the shortstop. Batting second, Adam Frazier from second. Brian Reynolds, a left fielder. Batting third, Josh Bell, who I like Josh Bell. I think he's a good first baseman. I think he's got a good bat. Same with the player that they have batting fifth, their right fielder, Gregory Polanco. Then batting sixth, they have Colin Moran from third. Batting seventh is the starting catcher, Jacob Stallings. And batting eighth is essentially the player that they have sliding in there for Starling Marte, Jared Dyson from center field. Then their pitching staff kind of goes as follows. That would be Joe Musgrove, Chris Archer, Trevor Williams, Mitch Keller, Stephen Brault, and their closer, Keone Kela. And part of why I don't see a lot of talent on this team is the fact that, or the Chris Archer trade from, I want to say either 2 years ago. No, it certainly wasn't last season. I think it was the season before last. Chris Archer was one of the aces for the Tampa Bay Rays, who, yes, I know this all sounds like, oh, I'm just going to talk about the Rays the whole time, but this trade really did kind of kill a lot of the talent that this Pirates team had. They traded Austin Meadows and Tyler Glasnow to Tampa for them. And if you look at that, last year, Meadows was an all-star. Glasnow, before getting injured and missing a lot of the year, was looking like one of the best pitchers in baseball. He had the lowest ERA and he had a ton of wins. I think he was 10-1 to start the year, something crazy like that. But he got hurt. And thing is, this wouldn't be as bad for the Pirates if Archer was playing like a number one guy, and that just isn't the case. He isn't their number one guy right now, and it looks like that's kind of past him. He isn't going to be playing like that to that same level that he did in Tampa for the foreseeable future. And then looking at this offense, it's paltry. There isn't a lot of power. There isn't anything really notable. Like I said, I like Josh Bell. I like Polanco. Those are two bats that I like, but two bats doesn't make an offense. Sure, they'll help, and sure, they'll bring a little bit of quality to the team, but I don't see a lot there. And this team hasn't made the moves or the requisite additions to fix these problems. And that's why I think next year for the Pirates is going to be sad yet again. I don't think it's going to be very good. And now it's time to do one of my favorite things, or not do one of my favorite things, but get to one of my favorite parts of the show, looking at the division as a whole and how I think that they will play next year. Like I said, just based all in all in talent on both sides of the ball, pitching and with their offense, I think the Cardinals win the division again. That would be just another year in the last 2 decades of the Cardinals just being consistently good. I think they win the division again. And here's where some of the hot takes come in, because I think the Brewers have gotten significantly worse. And I like the Brewers. I love Christian Yelich, as I already said. And it kind of hurts to say that I think they've gotten that much worse, but I think they're kind of trying to plug and play essentially with their infield and with a lot of positions on that team. I don't think they're all that good. I think both the Cubs and the Reds have gotten, well, the Cubs haven't gotten better, but because of how much worse the Brewers have gotten, I'm going to put the Cubs above them. I'm going to put the Reds above them. So this is kind of how I've got it looking right now. So the Cards at 1, the Cubs at 2, the Reds coming in either at 2 or 3, depending on how well the Cubs pitching staff plays and how their bullpen plays. I could see either the Reds or the Cubs coming in that second spot, have those two either or kind of flip-flopping. The Brewers at 4. Yeah, the Brewers at 4 and the Pirates at 5. the Pirates just haven't done much to impress me on paper or just how they played last year. I just don't see a lot of talent on that team, whereas every other team has either made moves to add talent or they already had that talent. So that is pretty much all I have for you guys today. If you guys have anything else for me, thank you all for tuning in to Just G Live. Again, I really hope that what I'm doing here is at least helping some people get through the horrible situation of everything that's going on right now. I personally really appreciate all the support and everybody watching, liking, and commenting. But if you guys don't have anything else for me, that is all I have for this afternoon. Come back Friday at 5 o'clock, same time, same place. We'll be talking about one of the more interesting divisions in baseball, the NL East, home to some teams that there are a lot of local fans of in this area. But please come back. Tune in Friday afternoon at 5. Until then, peace.